All right, and we are live back on Beyond the Box Spotlight with Karthik Manimozhi from RentMoola, CEO of RentMoola. Thanks for coming on the show, Karthik.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for getting my name right. Really appreciate it.
I try. So, Karthik, with RentMoola, I think before we dive into all the fun stuff of where the industry's at, I think for the benefit of the audience, I would love to hear a little bit more about what RentMoola does, what you guys are up to, and as well as your background story, how you become the CEO of RentMoola.
Yeah, let me start with me because I like talking about myself. But originally from India, started my career after my engineering degree with Citibank in the early 2000s. And then when Germany introduced a green card program just to attract interesting talent from around the globe like US did, I happened to be one of the first 5 green cards to enter Germany at the age of 20.
That's a cool fact.
so they actually came to India. They ran an ad that said, apply to join SAP and you'll be in Germany in time for Oktoberfest. I got 10,000 applications, 8 cities. I was one of the first 5 guys to pack my bag and move to Germany. What started was an amazing 13-year relationship with SAP, most of the time in Europe. I initially started in technology, and then they sponsored my MBA program. I did my MBA from Purdue and 4 other European universities. And post my graduation, they put me through a management rotation program. So at 25, I was managing director for SAP Hungary, interim, and Sweden. So that started a fantastic journey. Mostly my brand in SAP at the time was turnaround management. So they would fly me in, and I would have a few weeks to a month to turn around the sales side of the business. And I was really enjoying it. But that journey took me, through different parts of Europe, Scandinavia, Central Europe. I set up SAP's operations in Greece, Turkey, and Dubai from scratch. I moved to London in 2008, right around the financial crisis.
The good times there, yeah.
Yeah, so my career has always kind of crossed road with some of the biggest crises that hit the market. Right, I started my career right around the dot-com bust in 2001, and then in 2008, I found myself heading up the mid-market business in UK. I got to tell you, Mike, I think it had a big impact on who I am today because I saw the real pain. 65% of UK economy is mid-market, and you have to see that painful side of 20,000 jobs lost is the side of Christmas. And the difference between the companies that made it and the ones that did not is cash flow, their access to liquidity. So I've been really obsessed, and you hear me talk about this all the time. How do you build a recession-resistant organization? It comes down to liquidity. That's all people need, a second chance. Be it a family in middle America or a small business, all they need is that access to liquidity, the benefit and privilege that most of the Fortune companies really enjoy. So that was the story. So I had a successful stint turning around our business at SAP around the financial crisis. So I was rewarded, promoted, packed my bags, moved to New York. And my first job was to manage an acquisition business called Business Objects for the mid-market out of Vancouver. So I ended up flying across continent for 6 months, living in New York, flying to Vancouver. And then after that, I took on a more strategic role within SAP as chief of ecosystem, in charge of really building relationships, partnerships, and driving incremental revenue. So long story short, in a 4-year period, we took a business which was around 160 million, and we grew that to $1.2 billion. Wow. And it was a great learning curve for me in Americas. So not only was SAP becoming more acquisitive, this is the time when businesses were flipping from on-premise to SaaS. So everything from your go-to-market to your financials to your reporting, and most importantly, the new generation of partners was very different. So I owe a lot of my learnings to my time at SAP. And then I look back 13 years in, 2 companies on my resume, SAP and Citibank. And I was here in Silicon Valley. I had my green card. And I thought, okay, you know what? Time to kind of try out this thing called entrepreneurship. So I ended up taking over as president and chief operating officer for a pre-revenue startup in the HR space. So when I joined, they were very small, really small company. They could not do 6 week payroll, but I thought it was a good way to break the brand, get into the world of startups. Right. So long story short, we raised some capital, and then we took the business to 1 million in revenue. and a lot of amazing things happened because, not only did we get some great customers, we also got a great story around how do you fix the recruitment in the HR space. And we used a combination of gamification, data to kind of really create some exciting opportunities, a challenge-based recruitment platform that people can use. So that got a lot of attention. We did a reverse merger with a firm in Australia, took the company public, and guess this, 2 months after IPO, the business was valued at $1 billion. Very different times.
Number two. So if I'm keeping track, that's a number 2 unicorn right there.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah. There you go. And then after that, I looked at it, a 700x looked like a very steep multiple to keep. And I worked all my life on a public company. So I said, okay, you know what, guys, early investors made 23x, shook my hands, moved on. Went back to my roots a little bit to EMC, which was a major federation, over 24 billion in revenue, multiple divisions. And I was working for a division called Enterprise Content Division. So I headed up their global sales. The business was shrinking 3 years in a row. It was an $830 million business. So I stepped in. They already had a great innovation on the platform side with cloud and mobility and so on. All they needed was a punchy go-to-market, which we were able to do. So we grew the business for the first time 9% in 4 years. And at 300 million profitability, EMC was first acquired by Dell, and later the division was spun off and sold to OpenText for 1.1 billion. So number 2. So moved from there and packed my bags, moved to beautiful La Jolla, which is home for me now in California.
Of course, good choice.
Exactly. I moved from the Bay Area, so I was initially, thinking about, is that a good move? Turns out it's a great move. It's a wonderful place here to live in.
Terrible weather, I hear.
Yeah, exactly. The same year round. So we started my career as global head of sales for a fintech company called Kyriba. Already a market leader. They were providing CFO solutions for treasurers and CFOs. Market leader, 51 million recurring revenue, and a market cap around 250 million. We had a conversation with the CEO, and when we set some lofty goals, we said, okay, growth is good, but we probably need to crack that rule of 40. We need a much more exciting growth. We need to look at the addressable market, currently 2 billion. We should probably expand the market and mostly, build a business with a $1 billion+ valuation. So shook hands, came on board. And as I always do, I looked at data as a way of kind of really expanding that addressable market. And we did expand the market. We took the focus from packaged software to more of, let's talk about empowerment of the C-suite CFO organization. And then we spoke about liquidity. How do you build recession-resistant organizations? So I was able to, with support from the organization and leadership, successfully expand the addressable market from treasury only to payments, to supply chain, to FX payments, to broker dealership. So we did quite a bit of expansion. And long story short, we tripled the revenue in 3.5 years. We went from 50 million ARR to 165 million 3.5 years. And that set out the foundation for the business to be bought out. Actually, I would say invested by a private equity firm called Bridgepoint. So they put in around 1.2 billion valuation. So we quintupled the valuation.
Your favorite number.
Yeah, I like the numbers. So that kind of set me up. And, I was in Europe. My fiance grew up in Austria, but she's from Hungary. So I was getting married last year, June, when I got a call from the RentMoola board. And they're saying, hey, we heard your story and we want to expand into US. We also want someone who can really kind of shake the space up with some new innovative ideas. Is this something of interest to you? And I got to tell you, Mike, I looked at that market, no question it's a big market, right? Yeah. 1 in 3 households are renting. That's 50 million renters in US and Canada alone. 550 billion in collected rent and utilities last year alone. And I like non-cyclical business. And there's nothing more non-cyclical than paying rent. It's not like retail where you just do all your shopping during, Black Friday or New Year's or Amazon Day or Alibaba Day, whatever you call it. So I like the idea. But then how do you build a differentiated company in this space?
Right.
That's the question I always ask myself. And sometimes it helps to be an outsider because there are times when knowledge becomes a burden. And you look at it and you go, okay, you know what? Yes, I understand the business model. There is this large property managers, there are mid-sized property managers, there are single landlords, there are duplex. We also understand them very well. They're all about cash flow.
Yeah.
You collect your rent, you pay your mortgage. They're also about risk mitigation. They want to screen their tenants right. They want to make sure there is rental insurance to take care of them. And you know what? A little bit of working capital doesn't hurt either, right? So if you're a large company, you have reserves. If you're not, then how about using a asset that produces monthly income to borrow against it? So it's fairly easy, I would say. Data is key for them to understanding.
Right.
I think the future there is more around predicting renter behavior, right?
Right.
That's where it's going. But then the renter, on the other hand, very diverse, extremely complex population, 50 million people. You're talking about all stripes of color, of race, of ethnicity, of technical capabilities, of financial backgrounds. So it's a very diverse ecosystem. So I started kind of doing some research on it. And what I found, Mike, was not a surprise, I have to tell you, but the extent of the problem definitely shocked me. 78% of Americans and 53% of Canadians are all living paycheck to paycheck. Incredible. Yeah. And the golden rule is you don't spend more than 30% of your pre-tax income on rent. Reality, large cities, it's easily over 50%, some cases 70% of your pre-tax income on rent. And by the way, this is before COVID. So I looked at it and I went, okay, this is not sustainable. So I had a choice. I could go in and try to copy every other company and say, I'm going to build a CRM, an accounting platform, a property services. I'll throw in payments, and then I'm going to acquire 1 to 2 million units, and then that's how I get my valuation. The problem with that approach is that's not differentiated. It's very, it's not disruptive. It's more incremental thinking. Real solutions, real winners are built when you're solving a problem. And even before COVID, it was very evident to me that when 40% of the households in North America cannot absorb an unexpected $400 spend, what is the first thing that gets impacted? You make tough choices. You pay rent, or you take care of the health emergency, or you fix your car so you can go to work, or you buy groceries and feed your kids. This is a problem that isn't going away. You think North America, think India, think China, but 70% of the population want to live in that. Exactly. So I said, okay, the only way to solve this is I need to find a way to elegantly combine financial services with the rent population. Now, it's very popular, by the way, in retail. If you look at some of the biggest names that have come out in the industry, PayPal, PayBright, Shopify, they're all looking at some form of, let's do checkout credit, right? Buy now, pay later, interest-free. It's all happening. So why isn't $500 billion that the ordinary American families pay not supported by a similar financial infrastructure? Baffles me, right? And a lot of that has got to do with thinking. And the thinking is, if my renter borrows money to pay rent, he's a bad renter. Reality, not everybody has the luxury. People work multiple jobs. Your inability or does not mean you don't have the intent. So it's very bad, and I think it's not compassionate to equate people's inability to pay rent with their fiscal responsibility.
Right.
So so that is the point where I thought, okay, we are going to, if we have to make a difference here, it has to be by elegantly lacing these financial services. Give them options like line of credit, consumer credit, working capital, microloan, but it has to be differentiated enough. It's just not good enough to come out there and say, I'm going to help you borrow based on your credit score. That doesn't cut because that's already available.
Which is so interesting because all of these paths seem to have come together at almost a perfect point in time, given what's transpired in the last, I can't even think right now, I guess we're in October since February, right? So, since
right.
COVID has hit, it's almost compounded those issues. So, let's walk me through this. So you take the helm of RentMoola, Q3 of 2019, you're putting together the strategy, and then, the world seemingly changes in front of our eyes. So you're sitting as a CEO here. What did you have to do, and what were you looking at as that all sort of came across your desk?
Yeah, so the number one thing is I'm driven by data. Data never lies. So I was looking at it and go, okay, if pre-COVID, we had this very delicate ecosystem, very fragile ecosystem of renters, what is COVID going to do? And we started tracking the impact of COVID. So I like to track them in 3 waves. Wave 1 of COVID. This is early part of 2020. When February came, March came, for the very first time, the size, scope, and gravity of the situation starts to hit the general populace. the landlords were struggling because typically they relied on their front office staff to collect their rent, reconcile the books, and so on and so forth. So now it became absolutely necessary to have a contact-free payment method available to the renter. Yep. Also, you cannot touch a money order, check, or cash because they could be carrying pathogens. And forget the fact that you can't staff your front office because everyone's sheltering in place. So wave one was digitization of payment. Not surprising at all. People thought, okay, that makes sense. Let's go in. Wave two started. The wave two is a combination of both adequate and inadequate government action, depending on which country you're looking at, Canada or US. So what we saw there is like government relief coming in. Okay, you can defer your rent for a certain amount of time. The lenders would defer your mortgage payment for a certain amount of time. Stimulus packages coming in, unemployment benefits coming in. So impacted different populations differently. Now, it's also arguable how much does a $1,200 check do when the average cost of rent and groceries in California is $2,300, right?
Yeah,
so you have
point.
to, exactly. So there's a lot of things that were happening. But long story short, people are also worried about disrupted economic activity. Right. One of the first things you do when you lose your job is you check your bank account. And that's what people are doing. They wanted to preserve their liquidity as long as they possibly could. So we saw a big spike in people using credit cards to pay for their rents. So 30 to 40% jump in US renters using credit cards to pay their rent. Now that is a double whammy. Here's why. All you're doing is just postponing the problem.
Yep.
30 to 60 days from now, not only do you still owe the rent, you owe it with interest. Yep. And that's the problem. So now comes wave three. This is the one that we dreaded about, and it's as bad as we imagined it was going to be. The wave three is what we call the cash cliff. The cash cliff starts when, number one, the government support slows down. So we were anticipating the unemployment checks goes to 1/3 its size. There is a real possibility there is no check at all. That's the reality in the US today. We don't know what's going to happen. That's a real problem. Number two, all the deferred rent are now due. And get this, $21.5 billion is the amount of past due rent that ordinary American families owe today. $21.5 billion. It's a mind-boggling amount.
Yeah.
And then you look at how have people responded. And this is why I said, never, compare capability to intent of people. Never judge somebody by the severity of their financial situation, because 63% of renters have stayed on top of their rent by doing major sacrifices, dipping into their savings, selling off their assets, and even borrowing to pay their rent. You have to do it because you can't shelter in place without a shelter.
Fair point.
And it's harsh. And it's also hit landlords. Let's not forget that 10 million landlords are falling behind on their mortgage payment.
Well, to your point, right? They're financing their assets with the rent. So
yeah, so it's creating a situation where I think we need to dramatically rethink the institutions, the setup, things like credit scores. And I talk about this all the time. Let's take credit score, for example, right? What is the general way for people to access liquidity if you're a tenant? Your credit score determines everything, right? Now, I can make an argument, and I would be justified in doing that, by saying that maybe credit score is not a great indicator of someone's credit worthiness. Reason, fairly simple. It does work against you if you're a new immigrant. Yeah. I had some time before I built up my score. I never even used a credit card in Europe and still took a time. It works against people who had a couple of bad incidents in their life. And let's face it, I mean, US is the country of second chances. It really is, right? Yeah. And why don't we extend that favor to ordinary families, hardworking families? Why shouldn't two bad incidents or one bad incident in your life completely change the trajectory of your life and push you into a financial spiral? And I care about that, and I think about that, right? So there is an issue there. And last but not the least, the credit score is a one-time score to make one-time decisions, right? It's the snapshot, right? It does not take into account how are you changing your situation. If you happen to have the wrong score, the wrong time of decision-making, you are hurt. And for a very long time, you are hurt, right? And the problem with that is 1 in 5 credit score in the US is feared to have a fault in it. So this is driving so much of our life. And now, if you are a renter and you want to borrow money, depending on your credit score, you have a prime or a subprime option. The prime can go up to 39.99% interest. Subprime, 99.99%.
Wow.
And oftentimes opens door for predatory practices. People can blur the line between your principal and interest and throw you off, right? You can go into a never-ending spiral. So I think it's time that fintechs, institutions take a compassionate look at the situation. And if the argument is the system is working as designed, so my counter is the system isn't working at all. We have record number of people who are underbanked and outside the banking system today than any time in the past. So the system isn't working at all. So we need to figure out what is the alternative. Now we use data differently. Why not use data for good, right? Why can't we use people's data to determine their creditworthiness, their financial history, their social networks, I grew up in India, lower middle class family in India, and we didn't have the concept of let's go and do securitized borrowing. You know how my dad got me through school and my sisters through school and my college? We would borrow from friends and from family, right? Yeah. We had to make sacrifices. Now, without that, I wouldn't be here sitting in front of you talking to you about the possibility. I think it's time we pay things forward. I think it's time we think through, what the way we have structured the economy, the way we have structured thing is you can work very, very hard if you're in certain segments of the society. You can do 3 jobs when you're barely standing. I think it's a time for a wholesale look at all the factors and try to figure out, what is the right solution forward here. And there is no silver bullet. I think we should really resist the temptation to find silver bullets. What we have is a bunch of lead bullets you have to fire in sequence, right? so it comes down to public partnership with fintechs like us. So, for example, what happens if 40% of the US renters are facing threat of eviction? Who do you think the burden falls on? They become homeless. The counties have to worry about it. Cities have to worry about it. It's a tremendous strain on the program. What I think and I anticipate is that there will be increasing partnerships between fintechs and the government. So, payment plans are already, we talk about payment plans. So we will be introducing in Q4 a revolving line of credit. It's offered interest-free for a certain period of time through a partner of ours. So that will provide some more stopgap pieces there. All people want is not a handout. They just want a second chance. Right. They want to get over this so they can live their life. So that's the whole point. And we see maybe the public partnerships with fintechs to see, where is the right data? Can we prevent evictions by maybe the government pitching in because the fund is coming out of them anyway? If they're homeless, they still are responsible for it. There are people like Jeff Bezos in Seattle, Mark Benioff in San Francisco, who have openly spoken about reducing homelessness issues that could be a direct effect of COVID in Seattle and in San Francisco. So I think it's a time for mass action.
Well, and when you have all the data and you have the artificial intelligence and you have the machine learning that's going on, that's, up until this point been used largely around the gamification and the adoption of technology, it's, well, why not utilize this in a way that it makes fintech more effective and better, more of a public good, right? As it's working alongside. So I can definitely see that narrative. And, companies like yours being right along there at the forefront, moving it forward. And so, sort of as we sort of round out this conversation, I'd be really curious to get, obviously, if you've got a $21.5 billion cash cliff coming at you, what can you be optimistic about, right? That's one thing to be cautious about, but what makes you optimistic about these solutions coming and what the future looks like, both for, society as well as yourself at the head of RentMoola?
Yeah, so I'm an eternal optimist, right? And I believe,
entrepreneurs have to be, I think.
You can keep people down with a lot of pressure and negativity, but a single ray of hope and they rise again, right? So I know this is a problem. 21.5 billion, something's going to happen here, but it's also time for fintechs like us, for other systems to step up and change the game. We've already seen established institutions and larger organizations, including banks, being open to new ideas, because there is a risk if 10 million people, there is a ripple effect here, right? If 10 million people are worried about paying their mortgages, it is going to hurt them because the credit sits with these banks. So what we are finding is new hope in the form of partnerships, consolidations, partnerships, incubation, innovation at a pace. And I think that real estate industry is ripe for disruption. You have a $500 billion switching hands here, and yet without a reliable and a modern financial infrastructure to enable it, just passing the money for a fee is not innovation, right? You're not growing the pie. So I think there is a lot of opportunity here to expand. Number two, I think that you will increasingly see that the fintechs become systems of engagement. So, for example, the way I think about my business as head of RentMoola is, okay, there is a liquidity crunch, but is that the only problem? Because that could be something that has to be addressed immediately. But there is a broader problem here. Depending on your technical background, your age group, which generation you belong to, if you live in a large city or a small town, if you live in a Class A building or a Class D building, the amount of information available to you is asymmetric. So how do you, as a fintech, level the playing field? Financial literacy, regardless of people's backgrounds, celebrate diversity, make it easy for them to consume. That's the one thing I've been obsessed about. So, for example, the way we structured the entire tenant experience on our platform, some of these features are already live, some we're releasing in the coming months. But the way we do it is, let's just put ourselves in the shoes of the tenant. So our goal is to empower them. We have to empower them to take control of their finances. The best way to do that is I need a very diverse ecosystem of partners. I'm going to simplify this for them. I'm going to give them the experience, but I'm going to abstract the complexity. So I went around and made a ton of great relationships and partnerships with industry leaders. So I become the retail experience for the renter. So the renter walks in, they can start by searching for the right apartment through one of our partners, apartment listing services. They find the right apartment, they can apply for the apartment on our platform. We just do a tenant screening so they can get in front of the line of the apartment. Once they clear the tenant screening, we ask them, do you really intend to put 3 to 5 months of your rent up front as security deposit? That seems like a lot. For a $3,000 rent, you're probably talking 10 to 15K. How would you like that cash in your bank account? Instead, through one of our partners, we give you a $200 a year bond. Now, the landlords like it. I'll tell you why, because the money on security deposit is the most cumbersome for them to manage. The interest belongs to the tenant, and so they don't want to hold on to that cash. So they say, okay, I like this idea. Then we talk about, and we're structuring something with a leading insurance company. How about a rental guarantee? What if the security deposit runs out, dear landlord? Do you want to purchase a policy that can cover up to 4 months of rent and give you a rental in case something bad happens for you, like a rental guarantee backed by a partner? Right? And then we talk about, okay, exactly, right now. And then we talk about, okay, what about rental insurance? Because everyone is now staying in their apartment. So we care about the landlord. So in many cases, if a tenant, accidentally sets the apartment on fire or floods the apartment, in many cities and counties, the landlord is responsible if there is no rental insurance. So it's a risk they didn't account for. And the chance of this happening is very high right now because people are sheltering in place.
Right.
More than before. So we tell them, let's track it for you. So we tell the renter, do you already have a rental insurance? So just upload it for us. So we'll track it for you. Or if you don't have it, here's our partner from whom you can purchase in Canada or in the US. So in 2 minutes, they're now set up on rental insurance on the platform. And then we go from there to say, how about 360-degree payments? And this is something interesting, Mike. People who used one method of payment, like a bank transfer or written checks or a money order, are now forced to use 3 different methods of payment in a single year for rent. The reason for that is they're worried about cash in the bank account. So you can't always do bank transfers, if you don't know about your liquidity in the bank. So they want to sometimes use credit cards, they want to use wallets, digital wallets, other liquidity sources. So we are offering them all these options, bank transfers, credit cards, debit cards, specialty cards, digital wallets is coming soon as well, in-cash option. So if you're not comfortable going online, you still prefer taking a QR code, walking into a retail location, we can do that too. So CVS, Walmart, anywhere you can walk, 7-Eleven, for example. And then last but not the least, the way we are structuring this, and it's a feature which will be available in Q4, is a single-click checkout. So the renter can put all the expenses in the apartment into a shopping cart. And at the time of checkout, just like you do in retail, you tell them, in retail, they tell you when you're checking out your shopping cart, hey, do you want buy now, pay later? Do you want interest-free loans? And people consume that. It's a big business.
For sure, yeah.
You're doing exactly the same thing, but in a different way for the renter to say, hey, here is a line of credit for convenience offered interest-free for a certain period of time through our partner. So all they have to do is they look at that, they select that credit button, 30-second application, 60-second for a decision, and they can check out in 15 seconds. So it's estimate, but in under 2 minutes, you're able to use the line of credit for a payment. So it's like Amazon in a way, but comes with liquidity. Exactly. So that's what we're trying to do. And then for those of the people who would not qualify for that line of credit, and by the way, it's based on data, not credit score.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's data-based, not credit scores. So that's important to note as well. It's a revolving line of credit. So the focus here is not to just allow lending options for the client. Right. It's about flexibility. So we are not in the business of lending. We're not in the business of insurance. We are just a platform through which people get access, and we connect them. We provide the technical integration for them to access these services through APIs. And last but not the least, once you're done with your payments, now think about improving your credit score as a renter. How good will it be if you take one of the most on-time payments that you can make, rent payment, and allow that to help you boost your credit score. We do that on our platform to boost your credit score. So you can either go for a bigger apartment, or you could actually be a first-time owner. We can do that. And we are also exploring possibilities where you can access mortgage options if you are going from being a tenant to others. So it's as simple as we have the platform and we can integrate people in. And last but not the least, we have a comprehensive communication platform through our partner, UR Concierge Service. It's already available on the platform. So what it allows the landlords to do is create a community. That's important. And I keep reiterating the fact that community today is a must-have amenity. Absolutely. For the landlords and the tenants alike. So typically in the past, landlords had to put some effort into it, but they could also get away from it. I apologize. Sorry about that. So the reason for that is, you had record occupancy, you had high rents coming in. All you had to do is if a renter defaulted, show them the revolving door, and you could refill the apartment in no time. For the very first time in large cities, vacancies are pushing 10%. And the reason for that is that people are decided to move back to their parents.
Remote work. Exactly. Yeah.
So now more than ever, you need a brand to build with your community. And at a time when your apartments have become everything from gyms to workplaces to restaurants and shared spaces, and you see an increasing number of Gen Z and millennials in the pool, you really have to think about how do you create that amenity. And we're able to do that through bulletin boards. They're also able to promote, this is really cool, local businesses on the platform. So like restaurants and shopping, mom and pop shops. So you create that real inclusiveness.
Which when you're, a landlord or even a tenant, you're looking for these options. And so if you're on the landlord side, do I create it myself or do I partner or find a solution like RentMoola to come in? And I think that's what we love about it, is that it's got that holistic experience from end to end. And really, it only makes sense. And so obviously, COVID accelerated things that, were outside of anybody's control. But for you guys and what you're doing, I think it only benefits the great work that you're doing, not just in the fintech space, but also for society. So for those people that do want to learn more about RentMoola, Karthik, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way to get in touch with the RentMoola team?
Yeah, you can visit rentmoola.com, or you can send me a note to ceo@rentmoola.com, and I'll be very happy to follow up with you because each solution is customized. It has to be, right? Well, your situation may be very different from everyone else. So we'll work with you to help you get all kind of solutions in place to make it. So Mike, I would like to sign off by saying this, right? I know we are looking at one of the worst crises that humanity has faced. It is a combination of financial crisis with a global health pandemic. No one is immune, right? And as someone famously said, we may all be in the same water. We may all be facing the same storm, but we all are not on the same boat.
Right.
So it affects different people differently. What I would say is, with my experience being part of $3 billion exits in the last 8 years, key is solve a problem that matters. Solve a problem. Competition, it doesn't matter. I think this is a time where you're trying to change behavior at scale.
Right.
You know what? If 10 of my competitors is trying to do exactly what I'm doing, it adds validity
Right.
And it takes a village, it takes a community really to get out of this. And I would say embrace competition. You may be doing the heavy lifting, particularly when you're changing trends. You may benefit by working with competitors. Of course, protect your interests, but I'm telling you, to make great things happen, partnering is a great way. See where you can, access, great solutions and great products and great value. And as a community, we can unlock it much faster, and we can bring the value to the consumers, be it landlords or tenants, anyone. The goal here is let's work towards a goal.
Love it. Love it. And I think with that, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and really appreciated every minute of it. I know I learned a ton. So thanks again for coming on, Karthik.
Thank you, Mike, for having me. Real pleasure.